Morning, everybody. I am Brett L. Pape. That's Coach Bruce, and this is the Coach Approach. Coach, how are you this morning? Week 2, let's get into it, huh?
Let's rock and roll, man. Let's get it.
Did you get any sleep last night? We went that Colorado. Everyone had to buy into the hype or see what the hype was all about. Great game to watch. Obviously, Colorado State played pretty well. They got kind of a little chippy, but it was a good watch nevertheless.
No, I think when Travis Hunter got knocked out on the sideline, you were probably a little bit concerned if you're a Colorado fan, and the game kind of played that way. But hey, man, it found a way to win at the end. I tell you what, I was very impressed with Shedeur Sanders at the quarterback position. I thought he looked great last night. He threw the ball on time and in rhythm quite a bit. And Harrison, Michael Harrison, the tight end, put on I didn't get to see the final numbers, but that dude looked like he was an absolute stud last night. What a great game to watch.
Yeah, it was a fun game to watch. Hey, let's get into what we hope is a slate of great games. Before we get into the script, though, let's go ahead and use 6 people that are currently in. Man, fire away with your questions. Sammy, love the question. You got to start 2 of these, Coach. We got Josh Kelly, who will, he had a bunch of carries last year while splitting the role with Austin Eckler. Eckler is out. You got Breece Hall, despite only getting 10 touches last week, rushed for 129 yards. And you got Jamal Williams with the Kamara suspension. He's still the lead back. But for me, let's get your take first. Who do you like in this one, Coach? Who do you like?
Yeah, so I like Joshua Kelly. I think in a Kellen Moore offense and looking at what they did, how they used Austin Eckler, and it was the same Austin Eckler we saw last year in week 1. I think Joshua Kelly slides right into that role. You've got some situations there that I like. So I like Joshua Kelly. I like Breece Hall. I think it's a tough matchup against Dallas. I think he sees a little bit more of the timeshare there this week over Dalvin Cook, especially in the passing game where Dallas can be susceptible. And then Jamal Williams, look, I love it. I think he's going to be a high-volume guy this week. He's going to be that guy that can get you 20 carries for 64 yards. And it comes down to he's almost irrelevant in the passing game. Does he get in the end zone or not? So for me, it's Joshua Kelly and Breece Hall. I think I like their matchups a little bit better this week.
Sounds good. I'm right there with you, Coach. I expect a lot out of both Kelly and Hall. I think I was pretty impressed watching what we saw last week out of Breece Hall. All right, hey, let's jump right into the 10 o'clock slate. Baltimore Ravens 1-0 at Cincinnati Bengals 0-1. Picks, I'll go first. This is your game. You'll break down the rest of it. I like the Bengals bouncing back after last week. I see them winning 17-13 in a pretty tough game defensively, but I just can't see these guys starting out 0-2. What are your thoughts, Coach?
Yeah, so I like the Baltimore. I mean, I like the Cincinnati Bengals in this one, 28-23. I've got a little bit more high scoring than you. And part of that is the Ravens are down 4 starters. You got free safety Marcus Williams, you got corner Marlon Humphrey, you got left tackle Ronnie Stanley, you got center Tyler Linderbaum. I think that's a big deal for Baltimore. So I think Baltimore's going to have to, like Todd Monken wants to do, which is going to throw the ball and spread it out a little bit more. I've got Cincinnati. I think Joe Burrow comes back in a big way this week, 28-23 Cincinnati, which means that I'm taking Cincinnati at -3. I'll take them to cover that. And the over-under, I've got the over.
So I got the under, and I'm taking, obviously, the Bengals in both. Let's get right into your start and sits, Coach. Expected more out of the offenses of both these teams last week. How do you see it playing out this week?
Yeah, I think Lamar Jackson pops this week. I think Mark Andrews being back slides right into that wide receiver 1 option. I say wide receiver 1 because how often he lines up in the slot. He's really a wide receiver at the tight end position. And Zay Flowers is a rookie last week with Andrews out. I know there's some concerns about the touches there. I'm more concerned about Rashad Bateman being affected by that than I am Zay Flowers. I think the wiggle he gives you after the catch, I think they continue to target him. So Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews, and Zay Flowers are starts for me. Rashad Bateman and Odell Beckham I'm not comfortable with starting. Obviously in deeper leagues, you can look at that a little bit differently. For Cincinnati, I think Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase are obvious. I think Joe Mixon's a volume play. Last week had 18 touches for 73 yards. I think he continues to see the volume both in the run game and the passing game. And T. Higgins, look, he didn't do anything last week. I think this is a bounce back week for him with, again, the free safety and their top corner out. I expect T. Higgins to get involved a little bit more. I think they're going to make a point to get him involved more. So I think he has a bounce back week this week. As far as sits go, I've got, I already touched on Odell Beckham, only 3 targets last week, 2 grabs, 37 yards. Bateman, only 3 targets last week. And I think the question now becomes, what are we doing with Gus Edwards, right? 8 carries, 32 yards last week. Obviously, J.K. Dobbins got hurt. No targets last week. They do not like to target the running backs. Justice Hill, 8 carries, only 9 yards, 1.1 yards. His yards after contact was not good at all. No targets in the passing game last week. The only reason why he was relevant was the 2 touchdowns. Don't see that happening this week. I'm staying away from the Baltimore backfield. I want to see how that shakes out in week 1 without J.K. Dobbins. I do get if guys want to start Gus Edwards based on what your roster looks like. And then for Cincinnati, Irv Smith is the only guy there that I don't like. I expect Cincinnati again to get T. Higgins more involved. Irv Smith was only targeted 5 times last week with 3 grabs for 17 yards. So not a great A-dot, not a lot after the catch. So that's where I see that game.
I like it. Kind of with Seattle. I'm jumping up to the next game, but you brought up Bateman and so forth. Bateman, I was real disappointed with his usage last week. He's got first-round capital. You got Flowers with first-round capital, and Flowers came out last week right away and established he is the alpha in the offense. So, yeah, I'm staying away from Bateman until I see anything differently. Let's move on. But while I'll break down Seattle Seahawks, get your pick on who wins, then I'll get in the start and sit. Why don't you look at Cam's question there, Coach? While I'm doing this, you can type in the answer. Seattle 0-1 at Detroit Lions 1-0. As far as winning the game, Seattle talking about being banged up. They're without both their starting tackles. I like Detroit winning 27-17. I'm taking the over, and I think Detroit also takes it on the money line. How about you, Coach? How do you see it being played out?
Yeah, I've got Detroit Lions 34, Seattle Seahawks 27. I think it's a higher scoring game. So I've got Detroit covering at -4.5, and then I've got the over.
All right, looks good, Coach. Let's move on to start and sit. Starts for Seattle. I'm only comfortable starting 2 people today. That's Kenneth Walker and DK Metcalf. I think we saw last week with what Seattle was doing with the usage. It was all Kenneth Walker. Yes, Zach got some carries, but I expect Walker to lead the backfield. DK Metcalf was able to get in the end zone against the Rams. I expect him to do that again. As far as Detroit, obviously you got a must start every week in St. Brown. I like Gibbs. I think Gibbs is going to have a big day. Everyone's expecting kind of his breakout game. And then I also like, much like last year where we had no issues starting both Swift and Jamal Williams in the backfield. I like that this week as well. I'm going to start Gibbs and Montgomery. For sits, until I see more out of the Seattle offense, I'm sitting Jackson Smith-Njigba. I'm sitting Tyler Lockett. I'm sitting Zach Charbonnet, and I'm sitting Geno Smith. For Detroit, I'm passing on all other pass catchers not named ARSB, and I'm sitting Goff this week. Coach, you got anything you would dispute with that, or you like anyone that I didn't mention?
No, I like it. I tried to answer Cam Overland's question, but I wasn't able to. For some reason, my chat room is saying it's having trouble connecting to the internet, but yet I can hear you just fine. And you can hear me, but I went with Breece Hall. He's got Breece Hall, Nico Collins, Tyler Algier, and Khalil Herbert. I mean, that's these start and sit questions sometimes are not the real obvious answers, right? I mean, those are four good options to put in there. I put Breece Hall simply because I think the New York Jets are going to have to, especially with Zach Wilson, are going to have to throw the football a little bit more. I think Breece Hall and what he can give you in the screen game and in the short to intermediate passing game, where he can run a complete route tree as a running back. But I think you see him take a little bit more usage from Dalvin Cook this week. Nico Collins, to me, is touchdown dependent. I think he sees the targets. Tyler Algier, I think, takes a little bit of a step back. I think they're talking about slowly bringing Bijan Robinson in, but I think we see Bijan Robinson get more of the goal line work if that happens this week. So I expect that to happen. So I'm taking Breece Hall there.
There we
Khalil
go.
Herbert, I think Rashawn Johnson is going to get a 50-50 split this week. Would not be surprised.
I'll tell you what, I think Cam's got a good problem to have. I mean, those are, those are, I'm used to scraping down the bottom of a roster when having to find someone to flex start. I think you can't go wrong with a few of those guys there. And then Andrew wants to know, start Nico Collins or Scary Terry. I like Scary Terry even against the Denver defense. Chad Bruce, thank you for the question. Walker or Barkley? It's Barkley for me. What about you, Coach?
Yeah, it's Barkley for me too. I think, first of all, you're going to get his route participation in the passing game and his overall usage in terms of volume in the New York Giants back, but there's nobody after Saquon Barkley, whereas Walker's got to contend with Zach Charbonnet, who you and I both like this week. We'll get into that a little bit later, but yeah, I'm definitely going Barkley there.
And then Andrew also wants Dalvin Cook or Kyron Williams. It's Kyron Williams for me. Actually, neither one of them have a great matchup. You got San Francisco defense and you've got the Dallas Cowboys defense. Who do you like out of those two, Coach?
Yeah, I like Kyron Williams. Just touched on Brees Hall. I think Brees Hall is just the more dynamic back with the New York Jets, and he showed last week that he's going to be just fine. He's recovered from that ACL injury, so I don't think Dalvin Cook is going to be as much of a shareholder in that offense as people thought early in the season. And I think Kyron Williams got an opportunity this week to be the guy. So I lean Kyron Williams this week.
Love it. Hey, thank you guys for the questions. Keep them coming. But as we wait for more, let's move on to our next game. Indianapolis Colts 0-1 at the Houston Texans 0-1. Two rookie quarterbacks starting their second game of the season. I personally here like the Texans at home. I like their defense. I thought that Stroud played pretty well in week one. You know, he had 40 pass attempts, which for a rookie is pretty impressive for them to trust him already to do something like that. So I like the Texans winning 21-16. How about you, Coach?
Yeah, we see this one a little bit differently, but I certainly get your point. I've got the Colts 19-13. I was very impressed with what we saw from Anthony Richardson last week, both as a runner, and I think it looked very good, especially attacking the intermediate areas of the field with Michael Pittman last week. So I've got Colts 19, Texans 13. So the Colts will cover at -1. And then I've got the under. I do think this is a low-scoring game.
And who do you like for starts and sit in this one, Coach? Before we get into that real quick, is Aaron Jones confirmed out? Yes, he is. It's going to be the A.T. Dillon show today. All right, go ahead, Coach. Get in the start and sits for Colts versus Texans.
Yeah, so for starts, I've got Anthony Richardson. Just talked about him. QB4 last week in his NFL debut. And then I like Michael Pittman. Got a 28% target share last week on 11 targets at 8 grabs for 97 yards and found the end zone. I think he solidified himself as a wide receiver one there. For Houston, look, there's a lot of talk about Dameon Pierce, both in the offseason. I was high on him coming out. I didn't feel like Muschamp used him very well when he was at the University of Florida, so we felt like he had a good opportunity to be relevant in the NFL. Larry Tunsil looks like he is out, but I like Dameon Pierce, 13 touches last week for only 47 yards. I get the concerns about Devin Singletary and Mike Boone. It was almost a split timeshare between those three last week, but I think Dameon Pierce has a bounce-back week this week. And then Nico Collins, I think he continues to be the target hog there as far as the wide receiver group goes. You do have to, Robert Woods played pretty well last week too, but I think Robert Woods is going to just be that Nico's the guy. So as far as sits go, I've got anybody in this backfield for Indianapolis that's not named Zach Moss. I think Zach Moss comes in. Deion Jackson and Evan Hall did not look great last week. Of course, Evan Hall goes out early with the injury. Bring in Jake Funk, who could not stick with the LA Rams, is now with the Indianapolis Colts. I think this is Zach Moss's backfield. So if you're he's a sit for me. However, or he's not necessarily a sit for me. I'm sitting everybody else in that backfield. Depending on who you have, I'm not trusting Zach Moss. I have better options in his first week back as a starter this week, but I certainly understand guys in deeper leagues may want to do that. And then for Houston, I've got C.J. Stroud as a sit. Yes, I was impressed with them last week, just like you were, but I just think this week coming off the shoulder injury, I don't think it's anything major. If it was, they'd be sitting him out, but I don't trust that offense yet. I trust the defense, the D'Amico Ryans-led defense. I don't necessarily trust the offense yet, so I'm out on C.J. Stroud in the passing game this week.
I like it. Let's move on to the next one. Two teams that kind of went different directions last week than what many people expected. That's Chicago Bears 0-1 at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 1-0. I like Tampa Bay going 2-0. I like them being at home. I feel like there's a lot of the same defensive players that they had on their Super Bowl team a couple of years ago. So for me, it's Tampa Bay 27, Bears 24. How do you like this one playing out?
We're almost right on the same page. I've got Tampa Bay 23, Chicago Bears 21, which means the Bears cover at +2.5. But Tampa Bay gets the win. I think Baker Mayfield, look, the key to him is 21-34, 173. The overall yardage isn't impressive, but he did throw 2 touchdowns and, more importantly, protected the football. No interceptions last week. So if he can protect the football, use Mike Evans, use Chris Godwin, and use Cade Otton and those guys, and then get Rachaad White loose this week, I think that Tampa Bay pulls out the win and goes 2-0. And the Bears are going to be stressful times in Chicago. They start the season 0-2.
It's pretty rough, man. I wasn't happy watching that offense last week. I sure hope it kind of improves.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. Kansas City 0-1 at Jacksonville Jaguars 1-0. Real quick, couple questions. Pick one: Brandon Ayuk, Lamb, or Waddle. I would go with Lamb there. Question 2 for a question from Andrew: Flex Herbert, Hill, or Zay Jones. It's Herbert for me. And then Riley wants to know Hopkins or Pickens. I think Hopkins dealing with that ankle injury. I'm going to take Pickens, but and in that the passing offense of Tennessee isn't all that great anyway. So Pickens for me, not that Pittsburgh looked all that great last week.
No, my first response to Hopkins versus Pickens is part of like, I mean, I wish we had better options, right? But I have DeAndre Hopkins because I know he's the alpha there, even with Treylon Burks. I think he's the guy. I was not impressed with Ryan Tannehill last week. And, you bring in another pass catcher. You have Chig. On top of that, you have Derrick Henry in the run game. I expect to see a little bit better performance from Ryan Tannehill. But I still lean Hopkins simply because I think he is the alpha in Tennessee. Pickens does have Deontay Johnson out, so I get why you want to play him. But I need to see Pickens put it together. He still doesn't have a full route tree to me, and he's dependent on the touchdown. So we'll see what that looks like. But, hey, it's a tough choice to have, man. That's a coin toss, but I lean Hopkins.
Yeah, we didn't help very much as we picked opposite people.
Yeah,
Let's go on. Kansas City 0-1 at Jacksonville 1-0. Jacksonville has plus 3.5s with Kansas City being the favorite, but I kind of think Jacksonville's going to pull off the upset. I like them winning 31-24.
Yeah, I've got this Kansas City 34, Jacksonville 24. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. I think both Trevor Lawrence and Patrick Mahomes have big games this week.
All right, for starts and sits in this, I like Kansas City. Obviously, you're playing Patrick Mahomes. You got Kelsey back. I like him. I'm playing Isaiah Pacheco. And if I have to pick a receiver, I'm going with Rashee Rice. I think what we saw him last week do, limited touches, but there's not really a number one receiver right there, and I like his chances of becoming the number one receiver in that offense. For Jacksonville, I love what I saw out of Travis Etienne last week. Trevor Lawrence, you're playing. Calvin Ridley came in right away and showed that he is the alpha there, so I'm good with starting him, and I'm going to start Evan Ingram. For sits, I'm starting all receivers. I guess I'm sitting Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney until I see the breakout game actually happen. And for Jacksonville, I'm sitting Zay Jones and Christian Kirk. Anything you differ on there, Coach?
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you on the starts. I've got Mahomes, Kelsey, Pacheco, so we're certainly in line there. I do think Jerick McKinnon, depending on deeper leagues, with Clyde Edwards-Helaire out this week, hopefully gets more relevant in the passing game. And then, yeah, I've got Lawrence, Ridley, Ingram, and Etienne for Jacksonville. As far as sits go, I'm not trusting anybody on the wide receiver group. I know there's some talk about Kadarius Toney having his breakout game. I was impressed with Rashee Rice. Found his way in the end zone last week. Sky Moore was almost invisible. I would prefer MVS over Sky Moore based on what I saw this week, but I'm just not touching any of the pass catchers in that offense. And then for Jacksonville, a little frustrating to see Christian Kirk not. We knew he wasn't in two receiver sets during the preseason as much as Zay Jones was with Calvin Ridley. We saw that play out again in week one, which is why these utilization charts make a lot of sense. And there's a lot of truth to how that plays out in the regular season sometimes. So I've got concerns about Christian Kirk. So if I've got him, I'm probably pivoting somewhere else until he's a little bit more involved in wide receiver two sets.
Sounds good. I kind of took the lead on that one, even though it's your.
No, you're good, man. We were on the same page. That was awesome.
All right, let's move on. Green Bay Packers 1-0 at Atlanta Falcons, also 1-0. I was going back and forth on this game this morning, but I'm going to go with the team that I've been high on all summer long. That's Green Bay. Green Bay win 24-17. I like them with the points, and I also think they get over that number of 40.5. What about you, Coach?
Yeah, so I've got them Green Bay 23, Falcons 17. So I've got them scoring right at 40. I think these guys that pick the spreads and the Vegas odds are typically pretty accurate. But so Green Bay Packers covers obviously at plus 1.5. I do think this could be a great game. I'm looking forward to seeing the split between Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. I'm looking to see how much Atlanta tries to get Drake London involved this week. So there's some scripts there that I'm certainly interested in seeing. And I think with Aaron Jones being out for Green Bay is a big loss. I could certainly see Atlanta winning the game because of that. A.J. Dillon just doesn't give you as much. And then you've got Emmanuel Wilson. You pulled up Patrick Taylor from the practice squad. So after A.J. Dillon, it doesn't get very saucy. But for Christian Watson, I think, hey, this could be a big game for Romeo Doubs, and you could see some Jaden Reed get in the end zone.
Well, let's get into starting sits. And kind of just based on volume alone, I realize that A.J. Dillon hasn't done much when given the opportunity, but I like him here. I mean, if you have him on your team and you don't start him today, or you're probably never going to start him. So I'm starting A.J. Dillon today. You brought up Jaden Reed. I really like him today. I think he showed last week his ability to kind of maneuver through the middle of the field. Had some big third down catches last week. I like for him to get in the end zone. And I also like Luke Musgrave. I think he showed you last week that they're very comfortable throwing him the ball. And then he's an explosive player with a 50-yard reception. So I like those guys for Green Bay. For Atlanta, it's only three people for me. I like Bijan Robinson. I feel very comfortable starting Tyler Algier. You saw what he did this week. That's not changing. And I like Kyle Pitts. I think Kyle Pitts, of the pass catchers, he was the only one who did anything significantly last week. So I'm going Kyle Pitts. And sits for me, which is tough because I love Jordan Love. But I do think that, there's going to be some weird actions going on, whether it be a defensive score for Green Bay or, the A.J. Dillon show. I just would prefer not to play Love if I didn't have to. And, a couple words coming out this week that, yes, Romeo is expected to play, but that hamstring is still causing some issues. So I'm sitting Romeo Dubs. And then for Atlanta, until I see Drake London involved, I can't play him. And no way in heck am I playing Desmond Ridder yet.
Yeah, I've got Drake London sitting this week as well. I still believe in him. Had pulled the trade off, getting Drake London and Rashad White. I can't remember who I traded. It was a wide receiver too. I can't remember off the top of my head. But in Dynasty, you're taking the future, right? You're taking what that's going to look like. And I believe in the talent of Drake London. But this week, until we see something different, I'm not trusting Drake London either.
Yes, Riley, that offense is very difficult to kind of read. You get the issues of, obviously Smith wants to do one thing and one thing only, and that's try and find a way to win. He doesn't care about fantasy players whatsoever. So it's not going to be fun until they figure out a way to open it up more.
I said this on Twitter last week too. I said, if I'm a wide receiver coming out, like a Marvin Harrison Jr., I might go to my agent and say, hey, if Atlanta takes me, I'm not going there.
Yeah.
Right? So.
Yeah. All right, hey, let's move on to our next game. Las Vegas Raiders 1-0 at Buffalo Bills 0-1. I like the Bills in this one. A lot of people are going the other way, which I kind of find weird with the Raiders having to travel all the way back to the East Coast. But I got a Bills 23, Raiders 14. Who do you like, Coach?
Yeah, I got Bills winning 31-17, which means they cover the -8. And they cover the over at 47.5. I just think Buffalo. It's look. This is a team. It's got a solid roster. They didn't look good in Week 1. Josh Allen turned the ball over 4 times. I think this is a bounce back game. It's at home, and I think Buffalo takes this one. I think they take it pretty easy.
We're on the same page there. Who do you like for starts and sits for these two teams?
Starts, still Josh Jacobs. He's always going to be a volume play, and that's what you want. Is you want opportunities in fantasy football, and where you drafted Josh Jacobs, even with the potential holdout, you're taking Josh Jacobs and you're playing Devontae Adams. Jacoby Myers had a big week last week with 10 targets, 9 for 81, 2 tutties, but he's out this week. So I like you're going to play Devontae Adams no matter what, whether Jacoby Myers is playing or not. But for Buffalo, I like Josh Allen again to bounce back this week after 4 turnovers. Stephon Diggs, and I like James Cook. I think it's a good matchup for James Cook. He looked explosive last week. I think we saw with how those touches were distributed in the backfield. He's the clear RB1, the 3-down back in Buffalo.
Should be a fun. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think what's interesting is you look at the tight ends. You drafted Dalton Kincaid as your big slot guy, and you drafted Dawson Knox. So I think a lot of people are going to want to play, especially Dalton Kincaid, probably where you drafted him. But they both had a 92%. 95%, 92% participation rate, and a 9.7% target share for both of them. The difference was Kincaid was a 1.5 ADOT versus 7.3 for Dawson Knox. He was getting better value targets, but I do still believe in Dalton Kincaid. I'm just not ready to start either one of those guys yet.
Fair enough. Let's move on to their next game. Los Angeles Chargers 0-1 at Tennessee Titans 0-1. I don't know what it is about the Chargers. They seem to have one of the best rosters. Now, granted, they played an incredible offense last week in the Miami Dolphins, but I kind of see an upset here. I like Tennessee winning 21-14. I wouldn't be surprised if your former offensive coordinator with the Dallas Cowboys is not the interim head coach by week 8. There's something about that team where they just don't seem to get it done. And I don't know how much longer I'll just say San Diego. I don't know how much longer the LA staff up front is going to want to keep seeing Stanley kind of blow big game after big game. So I've got Tennessee 21, Chargers 14. Who do you like in this one, Coach?
Very interesting. So I took the opposite approach. I took the Chargers on the road against Tennessee to win 29-19. I just believe in Justin Herbert. I've seen the Kellen Moore offense for several years now. I know what he's capable of doing. The knock has always been his inability to make adjustments in big games when the games mean the most. This is week 2. If you look at what he's done as an offensive coordinator in Dallas during the regular season, he's consistently put together a top 5 offense. He's got 2 very good wide receivers. He's got a very serviceable tight end. He's got a running back, even with Austin Eckler out. We talked about him earlier this week in terms of the backup. I think he has a good game this week. So I got 29-19. Seems high scoring for the Chargers up against Tennessee, and how Tennessee likes to slow the ball down and run the football. I just think we see a Kellen Moore open the playbook up a little bit more for Justin Herbert this week.
You sure hope so. You just kind of want to see that offense get going, because I'll tell you what, they certainly have the guys on the offensive side that shouldn't be having issues. Starts for me, I like Josh Kelly. He's going to be the volume guy today with Eckler out. Obviously, you're going to start Herbert. And I like the number 1 and number 2 receiver in this offense. I like both Mike Williams and Keenan Allen this week. For the Titans, I like Treylon Burks. I like Derrick Henry. And I think we're going to get a blow-up game by Tyjair Spears. I really liked the usage that he got in his week 1, and I think he's going to get in the end zone. So I would feel comfortable starting Spears this week. For sits, I'm sitting any receiver that's not Williams or Allen. So Josh Palmer is going to be on the bench, and so is Quentin Johnson. For the Titans, I wasn't happy, or I kind of expected more out of Chig Okinawa last week, and I'm also going to sit Ryan Tannehill until we see a little more from that offense.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good game. I'm looking forward to seeing that one for sure.
Okay, let's move on to the 1 o'clock slate. We've got San Francisco, who looked incredible last week against Pittsburgh. They're 1-0 at the Los Angeles Rams, who looked equally pretty impressive by going up and beating Seattle. For me, though, it's San Francisco. I think they're the top team in the NFC, maybe right there with Philadelphia. But I see San Francisco win 31, Rams 14. Who do you like, Coach?
Yeah, we're pretty close. I've got San Francisco 34-17. I just think Brock Purdy's got 13 touchdowns in regular season starts and 6 regular season starts compared to 2 touchdowns. He just consistently seems to put up 2 touchdowns a game and sneak his way in the end zone. The rushing touchdown on occasion too. I just think there's too much. I was impressed on Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay and how this team played last week in terms of the LA Rams, but I think San Francisco's defense is just too much for them. And you've got Cooper Kupp still out. Puka Nacua is having some struggles. He's going to play this week, it looks like, but he's got a groin issue, which is never fun. As far as starts go, look, you're going to start Christian McCaffrey. That's obvious. Again, I like Brock Purdy because he consistently gives you 2 touchdowns a week as a starter. He doesn't turn the ball over. Brandon Ayuk, who had his, a lot of people want to say it was his coming out party. I don't know if I'd go that far. Brandon Ayuk was already a proven wide receiver at this level, so nothing he did last week surprised me. And Deebo Samuel, they got to find ways to get him a little bit more involved. I know they did it last week, but game script I know has a big deal to do with that. And then George Kittle coming off a groin injury. He's the 4th option, I think, in this offense right now. They used him a lot in the run game last week. Only 6 targets, 3 grabs for 19 yards. I'm not as confident in George Kittle this week as I am, but you drafted him probably as your tight end 1, so you're probably playing George Kittle. I'll make that crystal clear. For the Rams, Puka Nacua, he's a flex option if he does play. You probably have better options for wide receiver 1 and 2, but he could be a potential flex. And then Tyler Higbee in tight end premium leagues, he only had 3 grabs for 49 yards. Very surprised by that last week, but I don't think any of us saw Tutu Atwell and Puka Nacua both going for over 100 yards last week, but I do expect Higbee to bounce back this week. As far as sits go, for San Francisco, everybody's in play. If you want to go as deep as Jawan Jennings and their wide receiver 3, you can certainly do that. I think we all know that's not a start anyway. But you're playing everybody and anybody, even Elijah Mitchell, who we are both high on. If he gets an opportunity to get some decent touches, he could show out. Especially if this game gets out of hand, he gets a lot of volume late in the game. For the Rams, Van Jefferson, don't trust him. I mean, that's really Tutu Atwell. Is there enough there for you to feel great after last week to say that Tutu Atwell is going to have another game like this against San Francisco? Those are 2 guys I just don't trust this week. And I don't trust the backfield with Cam Akers.
Yeah, you kind of want to see a little more. I mean, you love the production, not production. You love the usage that he got with 22 carries, but he did very little with it. So kind of stay away from that backfield till we know more. Moving on, New York Giants 0-1 at Arizona Cardinals 0-1. I think this is a bounce back game. It better be a bounce back game for the New York Giants because they certainly didn't look good at any side of the field last week, but I like them winning 27-17.
Yeah, I've got Giants 24-13, and I think saying that the Cardinals are going to score 13 points and you've got them at 17, so we're right there. So New York Giants will cover at -4.5. I'm with you. I think Daniel Jones has a big game. I think Saquon Barkley gets it going, both in the run and pass game. So I've got the Giants winning this one pretty easily.
Okay, Starks, you mentioned Daniel Jones. I think he gets it going too with his legs. I think he gets a touchdown pass or two, but I really like what he's going to do running the ball today. So I like Saquon Barkley, Daniel Jones, and Darren Waller. For Arizona, I'm only starting James Conner and Marquise Brown. Marquise Brown, I'm probably only starting simply because of the fact that they got to throw the ball to someone. So there are my starts. My sits are all three of the receivers, Hodgins, Campbell, Darius Slayton for New York. And for Arizona, I'm sitting Josh Dobbs, Rondale Moore, Trey McBride, and even Zach Ertz. You good with those, Coach?
I'm good with it, man. I think it's well said.
Okay, DJ Moore or Godwin, I'll kind of answer these questions while you get into the New York Jets. I'll answer them in the comments. But New York Jets 1-0 at Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, we know what happened last week with the Jets offense and the unfortunate injury. Two incredible defenses. They talk about defenses in the NFL this year, and it comes down to the Cowboys, Jets, and Philadelphia is the best in the league, and you certainly have two of them right here. So I like the Cowboys winning 17-10 over the Jets.
Yeah, I've got a 21-13 Dallas. We both agree. We think it's going to be a low-scoring game, so we're picking the under at 38.5. And the Jets to cover at +8.5. But I do think that Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook are going to be the key to this game. They've got to find a way to have more balance on offense. If Dallas gets out in front early, they create turnovers like they did last week against the Giants. It's going to be a long day for Zach Wilson. The Cowboys had 4 guys or more with more than 4 pressures. They had 7 sacks last week. They turned the ball over. A special teams touchdown. The Jets have got to control the football. They've got to be able to establish the run. I don't trust that offensive line against the Dallas front yet, but I do think Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook give you enough from a run perspective, but I trust Breece Hall more than I do Dalvin Cook. We talked about that earlier. Starts for the Cowboys are Tony Pollard and CeeDee Lamb. There's no Brandon Cooks this week, so I expect Dallas to really lean on Lamb and get him a little bit more involved. I like to see a little bit more of that screen game. If they're going to play off coverage, I like using Lamb in the screen game. I like using Tony Pollard, like we saw him last week, getting the end zone twice. He never got those touches really when Zeke was around. You saw him get those goal line carries last week. As far as sits go, Alan Lazard, Randall Cobb, Tyler Conklin, C.J. Uzomah, you're not taking anybody that's a pass catcher outside of Garrett Wilson. Even Garrett Wilson's an iffy. But you drafted him where you did. He's the absolute alpha. They've got to find ways to get Garrett Wilson the ball. And then for Dallas, I'm not starting Michael Gallup, even with Cooks out. I just don't expect him to have a big impact this week. He's so dependent on the 50-50 balls, and I don't see the route running from him at a high enough level against very good corners and a very good defense in secondary with the New York Jets.
It should be a hell of a defensive battle. Sure wish we had Aaron Rodgers playing, but it'll be interesting to see what we're going to see out of Zach Wilson for the season. I mean, if we can just get him to manage the game, keep them in the game, don't allow any silly mistakes that you kind of saw last week the Giants do. So that'll be interesting to see. Kind of hit a bunch of these questions while you were talking, Coach. Do you mind jumping on, is Puka playing? You kind of already talked it. It sounds like he is playing, and if you're going to start him, it's going to be in a flex spot because hopefully you got some better receivers to put in with him having an injury right now. Let's move on. Washington's Commanders at the Denver Broncos. Washington's 1-0. Denver's 0-1. I think this is a bounce back game for the Broncos. I like them playing at home, and I like them winning 24-21. What about you, Coach?
Yeah, I've got Denver Broncos 19, Commanders 13. Denver Broncos obviously going to cover at -3.5, and they're going to be the under at 38.5. I just think that it's Russell Wilson. You've got Jerry Jeudy back, Cortland Sutton. Dulcich is out, but you've got Adam Troutman, who's more than serviceable at the tight end position. I don't trust in Sam Howell. For me, I'm not there yet. I don't like the uses Antonio Gibson got in week 1. I don't think Washington has enough offense there. If Denver's got, Patrick Surtain, I think he's one of the top 3 corners in the league. I think Denver can do enough defensively to make it a long day for Sam Howell. So I'm taking the Broncos here.
All right, let's go on and start and sits for Washington. I like Brian Robinson. You talked about Antonio Gibson's lack of usage last week. I don't know if that stops today, so I'm definitely going with Robinson. And I like both receivers, McLaren and Dotson. It's tough to pick which of those two. They kind of got a 1A and a 1B at the receiver spot, so I'm going with both those guys. And for Denver, you know what? I do think we're going to see a little bit more out of Denver offense. So I feel comfortable starting Sutton. I feel comfortable starting Jerry Jeudy. I'll start Russell Wilson and Javonte Williams. For sits, I kind of right there with you with Sam Howell. Need to see more. Need to see him act less like a young quarterback and get in there and make plays. Sitting Antonio Gibson until I see more from him, and I'm sitting Logan Thomas. For Denver, I'm sitting Troutman and I'm sitting Samaje Perine. Let's move on. We got 2 games Monday night. That'll always be fun. My wife will come home thinking, we'll get done with the games early, and yet we'll have an extra one. But we got Miami Dolphins 1-0 at the New England Patriots 0-1. I like the Dolphins winning on the road 35-24. Coach, what about you?
Yeah, I've got a little less scoring because I just think Bill Belichick matches up well defensively, but I've got Dolphins winning 23-21. Which means New England covers the 2.5 points that they're getting, and then I have the under. So I'm taking Miami. I think it's going to be closer than people realize. I would love to see it the way you see it. I'd love to see Tua come back and break the record for most passing yards in the first 2 games of a season. I love it when those guys are clicking and when Miami gets rolling. And I wish, and you and I are high on Devon Achane. You were higher on him before I was. I had to watch some of his film and go back and look at things a little bit more as a prospect, but it'd be nice to see him get some opportunities. But yeah, I take Miami on this one, 23-21.
All right. Who do you like for starting sits in this one?
So I've got Tua Tagovailoa. I think that's pretty obvious. I've got Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. I think the backfield's still a little bit muddy. I think Mostert, played well last week, but I'm not touching the backfield. For New England, I've got Ramondre Stevenson. I still think he's the guy over Zeke Elliott. Zeke Elliott had some touches last week, 7 carries for only 29 yards. He was targeted 7 times at 5 for 14, but he also fumbled only 3.6 yards per touch. So I'm not in on Zeke Elliott, but I am in on Ramondre Stevenson. I'm also in on Hunter Henry, who had a great one-handed catch last week. And then I like Kendrick Bourne. I think he's the wide receiver 1. 11 targets, 6 grabs, 64 yards, found the end zone twice. Devontae Parker is still out. Hey, for me, and then Durham Smythe is the other sit that I have for Miami. Just not banking on consistent output there. When you've got Jalen Waddle and you've got Tyreek Hill, Durham Smythe might have some opportunities, but I don't trust putting him in my starting lineup just yet. I got to see that for 3 or 4 weeks in a row before I trust that.
Yeah, but he's a nice guy to just pick up and put on the bottom of your roster and see.
He sure is.
But I mean, he's the number 1 tight end in an offense that is obviously pretty explosive. So he's worth sitting there and seeing what he can develop into. So that was the Sunday night game you just broke down. I mentioned 2 Monday night games. So let's start with the first Monday night game. And that's going to be New Orleans Saints 1-0 at Carolina Panthers 0-1. Kind of disappointed, not disappointed, because I do think rookie quarterbacks have to have a little leeway. And in game 1, obviously the Carolina offense did not look too good. Hope we see a little bit more, but I still like the Saints winning 24-13.
Yeah, I've got Saints 22-17. So they're going to cover the -3. They'll take the points and we'll be on the under at 39.5.
All right, for starting sitting this one, I like the New Orleans offense. I like guys, Derek Carr, I like him starting. I like Chris Olave, and I like Jawan Johnson. For Carolina, really nice to see what we saw out of Hayden Hurst last week. I think he's startable, and I like Miles Sanders. For sits, Michael Thomas, Jamal Williams, and Rashad Shaheed. Yes, it's ironic because last week you said, I'm really not going to start Rashad Shaheed until we see more out of him in the offense, and then he pops.
We saw it.
He pops for a big touchdown last week. Just don't expect that to happen each week. With the Panthers, I'm not going to start Bryce Young. I'm not starting Adam Thielen or Jonathan Mingo. Moving on, our last game of the week, Monday night, Cleveland Browns 1-0 at Pittsburgh Steelers 0-1. Really liked what I saw last week out of that Cleveland Brown defense. And, that offense, if we a lot of people wanted to see more out of Deshaun Watson, kind of want to see more of the Houston Texans style Deshaun Watson. And not the guy that we saw at the end of the year. Didn't see much from it, but you saw a hell of a lot of Nick Chubb, and I think that's what we're going to see tomorrow night. So I like the Browns 24, Steelers 20.
Yeah, I got Cleveland at 24 as well. Pittsburgh at 13. I just don't trust Kenny Pickett. You lose Deontay Johnson, your security blanket. Pat Firemouth is still battling a little bit of some nagging injuries, but I still think he leads the team in targets. But so starts, I've got Nick Chubb. I think what was really neat to see is I've got Jerome Ford in a lot of leagues. I drafted him in the later rounds. He got 15 touches last week. So if they get away again, Jerome Ford's a guy that can give you something. I think he's proven. Look, he is not Nick Chubb, not even remotely close. But if Nick Chubb were to go down or miss some time throughout a game, I think Jerome Ford has proven he's a guy that can at least come in and handle the volume. I like Elijah Moore this week, especially if Amari Cooper is out with a groin injury. We've been doing the show, so I haven't seen the latest on Amari Cooper, but if he is out, I certainly like Elijah Moore. Pittsburgh, I like Pat Firemouth with Deontay Johnson out. Pickens, if you have him, we talked about him earlier, can be a flex option for you. I still need to see more out of him. I'd rather be a week late than a week early when it comes to starts and sits. I don't trust Najee Harris in this matchup. I think Jalen Warren's becoming, again, the Tony Pollard to the later in the career Zeke Elliott. I made that comparison last week. I just don't trust it. Najee Harris was a guy you played because of volume. The efficiency numbers were never always there, but he was a volume play. That volume is now getting taken away by Jalen Warren. And then for Cleveland, nobody's a must sit in this game. I think you can make Deshaun Watson, obviously, was rushing upside. You've got Chubb. You can start James Ford in deeper leagues, so he's not a guy that is a must sit for me. Jerome Ford. I don't know why I keep saying that. Yeah, Jerome Ford. And then, Donovan Peoples-Jones, you can make the argument he's probably the third or fourth option. And then for Pittsburgh, it's Kenny Pickett. I'm not there with Kenny Pickett. Did not look good last week. I didn't love him coming out of Pitt out of college. And so now without Deontay Johnson, I don't trust Kenny Pickett this week against the Cleveland defense.
Coach, we got through all the games. We're good to go. Hey, you guys that came in, man, really appreciate it. Love the questions. You can always message either at Coach Bruce 122 or at Brett L. Pape. We'll get to any of your questions on Twitter over the next whatever. Well, you got about 47 minutes left. Looking forward to a great slate and looking forward to getting on and talking more football with you this Wednesday, Coach.
Yeah, we got to jump off because we got to get through our 25 teams we have ourselves and look at the latest injury report. So try to give you guys the latest breaking news and try to get you guys caught up to speed before you do your final starts and sits. Appreciate everybody tuning in, and we'll catch you on Wednesday night, man.
All right, everyone. Hey, let's have an injury-free day and go football.